What's up guys, it's Haney Design. Before we actually get into the video, I want to say thank you to all of my patrons. If you don't know, I started Patreon where you get access to all of my favorite files, links, brushes, overlays, everything like that, and it's only $5 a month. So I'd appreciate it if you guys went and check that out, but let's get into the video. So our first tip is going to be adding bloom to pictures. This is a very simple tip, but I see a lot of designs where I think people should add bloom and don't. So bloom is just when this light should be super bright and sort of bleeding over onto our player. And I'm just going to show you how to do that real quick, how I like to do it. So right click on this half circle and click solid color. For this design example, we're going to go with white because press Ctrl I on this part. You can see that this color back here is white. After that, we're going to make our brush smaller, be on our white, flow at 100, and our brush soft. What we can do is just paint over just like this. Just paint over like this, sort of bleed it onto our player a little bit. Messing around with the size of everything. Just like this. Let's add some onto our building. Just like that. So you can see how this bloom sort of makes it look a little bit more realistic. And yeah, that's it for the first tip. Let's get into the next one, guys. So for our next tip, we're going to be masking our player inside of a rectangle or a circle. I'll show you some examples of how I've used that before. I like to use it on commitment edits and stuff like that. So the first thing we're going to want is our player right here, just the cutout of our player. And below our player, we're going to click on our rectangle tool. And we're going to drag that and just make it as big as we want. So we'll make it about this big. Our stroke, we're going to drag down to 0. Our fill, we're going to make black in this case. We're going to go to our move tool and we're just going to sort of center it up. Just like that. We'll move it up even a little bit. Just like that. That looks good. Next thing, we're going to Control T, right click, and I'm going to hit skew. And I'm just going to sort of try to match up with his movement and what he's doing. So we're going to skew it just like that. And for our next thing, I'm going to show you guys this real quick. On our player PNG, I'm going to click on this layer mask button. And I'm going to go back down to our rectangle, control click, press L so I can hit select inverse. Go to this mask right here, brush, make sure we're on black, and we can erase this back leg. So it sort of looks like he's integrated with the rectangle. Next up, we're going to go ahead and show this stadium background we just found on Google. Right click and create clipping mask. I'm going to make it a bit bigger. It's where we see those lights in that scoreboard. So make it big just like this. I'm going to right click above it and click black and white. Create clipping mask. And then on our stadium, we're going to lower the opacity just to give it some sort of texture back there. Lower it to about 50. That's going to be it for this tip. Let's go into our next one. So for our next tip, it's going to be matching ground perspective. Now what I mean by that is sometimes you find a picture of a ground, it's a really good picture, but it doesn't match up with your subject. So your subject doesn't really look like he's standing on the ground, if that makes sense. So this was our original picture of the ground, right? And you can see it doesn't look like our subject is standing on the ground, but when we warp it like this, it looks like our subject is more aligned with the ground. And this is actually the same picture I used for the original edit you guys saw earlier. So I'm going to show you guys how I did that. So here's our original picture right here. You can see. What we're going to do is take this picture of this football field. Control T. We're going to make it bigger just to fill the screen like this. Then we're going to go to the top and hold shift and drag it down. You can see it's making the perspective look more sort of flat, right? Then right click and perspective, drag the bottom outwards, right click, rotate. I'm going to rotate it with his body just a little bit, just like that. And then what you can do is go to your mask right here, be on your black brush and erase just like this. And then obviously back here you can add all your elements you want, your sky, everything like that. But yeah guys, let's get into our next tip. So the last tip is going to be a highly requested tip, and it's well, the question I get asked is, how do I make my backgrounds? But that's definitely like a very vague question, and so I'm just going to show you guys how I blend my backgrounds. It's using a ton of different pictures, obviously. These mountains and these little mountains in this ground, they're all different pictures. So you can see we already blended out everything, but if I take all the adjustment layers off, then it's obviously not blended. I'm just going to take you guys through the steps I took to create this. So obviously we found this picture of our ground, okay? We had to match it up with this sky up here. So I'm just going to take you guys through everything I did. So the first thing we did was we came up here to adjustments and then hue and saturation. And this is something I do with all of my nighttime designs especially. So with our hue and saturation, we're just going to want to eyeball it, right? So we're going to eyeball it and we're going to have the saturation at this about the same saturation as the sky is. So I think, for this design, I thought -59 looks pretty good. About as desaturated as the sky, right? If you can try to imagine that. But for our next gradient map, I'm just going to start from scratch on this one, show you guys. So you're going to right click your half circle, gradient map, click on this part of your map right here, and go up. And you have all these options, obviously. You're going to click on your very left side, and this is going to be the darkest part of your sky. You're going to click that. Then you're going to go about 2/4, about right here. You're going to click on your second darkest part. Okay, so we're going to click about right here. We're going to go at 3/4. We're going to click on our second brightest part, so about right there. And then on your brightest part, you're going to go ahead and click usually some sort of white up here. Okay, and now what we can do is take this gradient map and decrease it. So we get the some of the sort of colors from the sky, we can put it down on the ground just like this using this gradient map. You can see how it's sort of changing the colors. I like to lower my opacity, of course, but there we go. Next we have our levels. So I'm just going to explain to you guys exactly what I did here. Adjustments, levels, and then these are the settings I used. So what I did was, you can see we have a light source right here. This light source, and sort of this one right here, but it's not going to be affecting it. So these two light sources, they're not going to be hitting this part of these rocks right here, since it's these parts, the top parts are covering the bottom parts. So this light source is not going to wrap around and hit these, right? So we just made it all darker just by painting it in with our white. And I usually keep my flow at around about 8. I'm just going to erase some of this and show you guys how exactly I like to paint it on. So we're going to have our white brush, and you can just literally paint on these bottom parts. Some of these darker parts you can get a little bit more detailed. Say maybe I want this part to get hit by the light. I think that part's going to get hit, so I'll keep that part untouched. We'll just sort of keep on darkening like we feel like it should be. No specific rules to design, but just sort of more of a feeling. I'm going to darken it just like that. You can see. Next up, we have our levels for our ground. Now, you could say all these parts of the ground that I darkened up are going to be hit by the light, but I like to have it more sort of like a vignette and then a spotlight on our player right here. So that's what we did, and you can see we made the cliffs even more dark. But again, we just sort of painted around areas we wanted to paint, right? I think you have to always take like how you would see it in real life kind of, and apply that to your picture. And that definitely just takes time to sort of figure that out. But I think this cliff right here would cast a shadow. This cliff would cast a shadow. All these cliffs would cast a shadow over here. And then at the top right here, I usually like to just keep this darker. So you can see exactly what we did. Next up, for our color fill, this is our highlights. What we did was right click this half circle, solid color, white, and we put it on overlay, clipping mask it, just like this. Then we're going to press Control I, turn our flow up to about 74. Not exactly, that was just a random number, it sounds good though. Then we're going to paint on all these parts that we think the lightning is going to affect the most. So I think the lightning is going to hit right here. Then we can press X and erase and make it sort of softer. And we're just going to paint around all of these parts right here. On the tops, it might hit right there. Might sort of come down here a little bit. It's going to go across the top right here, I think. It's all sort of just a feeling, right? So that's what I did across all these. Obviously on the bottom, I just painted on the bottom just like this. I lowered my flow to about 12. And all these highlights we just already had, we just painted on. Okay, so that's how we did our background. Sort of more vague. If you want me to go really in depth with it, comment, let me know, and I will definitely do that. But I want to go into a little tip for my player that I like to do. Just throw this in here at the end. So that same gradient map we used for the ground, I'm going to use that same gradient map for everything. And I'm going to apply it to the player as well. But when I do it to the player, I'm going to lower the opacity a little bit more than it is on the background. But I'm still going to apply it to the player. And it's just going to sort of blend him out a little bit more. You can see just like that. Blends him out. And I also lower the hue or the saturation of our player. And that's going to be it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Go check out my socials in the description and let me know any videos you guys want in the future. Don't forget to check out my Patreon, and I'll see y'all guys.